Hey guys, this is John. I'm playing Pschaak in the 15-minute pool on ICC. That's a hard name to say. I'm just taking a look at his stats real quick before I play my first move. Looks to be a pretty solid player. I'm going to play d4. Lost a little bit of time on that, but hadn't seen this guy before and just wanted to get a lay of the land. Sometimes I'll do that, depending upon my opponent's rating and their stats, I'll change up my play. Okay, so let's push d5. And we're going to have a Benko Gambit. I'll take this guy. So almost certainly he'll play a6. And usually I played e3. In fact, in almost all my videos on the Benko Gambit, I've played e3. Do I want to play something different, or should I just stick with old reliable? I gotta say, it's been going very well with e3, and I don't see much of a reason to deviate. Yeah, let's do it again. I could deviate just for the sake of mixing it up, but I've really grown attached to this line. If I were to deviate, lines that I might consider would be the Benko Gambit accepted, b takes a6. That is a critical test of the Benko, of course, just taking the pawn. b6 on move 5 is popular. Okay, my opponent plays bishop b7. I'll just play knight c3, protect the d5 pawn. And we'll see if he wants to postpone a takes b5, as a lot of people do. They prefer not to capture that pawn. Pretty solid ratings for my opponent. He's over 2,000 in 5 minute. He does take. Okay, so now queen a5 is usually played, if black wants to follow up aggressively, because then they would be threatening to take on d5. So this compels me to play bishop d2. Yep, they bring the queen back. So I'll play knight f3, and then assuming they take on d5 with the knight, I will swap, and then I will play a4, supporting the bishop. Note that after knight takes d5, black cannot take the bishop, queen takes b5, because they would run afoul of knight c7 check with the royal fork. So this is all theory. a4. Usually e6 is played now. e6, bishop c3. White will put the bishop on the long diagonal. And keep an eye on that g7 pawn. He plays bishop c6. Okay. That makes sense. Just trying to eliminate my bishop and also get his bishop off of an attack square. I don't recall seeing this move before, but given how logical it is, it's probably been played. So if I take, he takes with his knight. That seems to speed up his development a little bit. I can put my bishop on c3 then. But what other options do I have? Knight e5 was kind of my first instinct here. I was even thinking about knight e5, bishop takes b5, queen f3, attacking the rook and attacking f7. I don't know if that's sound. Probably not. I think he could just move his rook, and I might get to play queen takes f7 check, but then king d8. Taking on c6 is not the end of the world. So bishop takes c6, knight takes c6, bishop c3. I still have a lead in development at that point. He can play e6. I can castle. He may have problems with this pawn. Might have to play f6, something a little bit slower. That could be reasonable. I just really hate to give him knight takes c6. That tempo for development. I could move my bishop c4. I wonder if he could take on b2 then. Looks pretty greedy to do so, but perhaps he could get away with it. There's also bishop c4, pawn d5 to consider. I'd probably just drop my bishop back to e2 in that case. I could castle and let him take on b5 and win a pawn, but try to... Let's say I castle, he takes b5, I take with my a pawn. Let's say the rooks come off the board. Rook takes a1, queen takes a1, queen takes b5. Maybe queen a8 then. His knight is pinned. In fact, that might give me pretty good compensation. Bishop takes b5, a takes b5. Or, sorry, castles first. Bishop takes b5, a takes b5. Rook takes a1, queen takes b5, queen a8. Let's say e6. Maybe bishop c3 then. He could put the bishop on d6. I take g7. Rook g8, bishop back to c3. That looks interesting. Let's give it a shot. This will at least put him to the test, and if he wants to be consistent, grab the pawn on b5 and reconcile himself to the fact that he's going to be defending. He's going to be up a pawn, but he'll be defending for the foreseeable future. I'll pre-move this capture. We spent a little time on that previous move, but I do think that decision was important. Up till that point, it had been just automated. Okay, and he doesn't take. He just plays e6. I could play bishop c3, just make a normal move. Let's do that. I'm still not going to take on c6. I'm gonna wait and see what he does. So the bishop really belongs on this diagonal on this line. It attacks that g7 pawn. Now, if he had done e6 instead of bishop c6, and his bishop were on e7, I would not be castled, and bishop takes g7 could run into rook g8, and I might have trouble with the g2 pawn. But if he plays bishop e7 now, I can take g7, he plays rook g8, I just withdraw the bishop, and I've got f3 guarded by my queen, and he has an open g-file towards my king, but I don't think I'm that concerned in that position. So I'll be curious what he does here. I think this next move will indicate whether he's going to continue trying to avoid capturing the pawn, or whether he just wants to go for it and transpose to the previous line. It'd be nice to build on this mighty 2400 rating I have in the 15-minute category, wouldn't it? If I get up to 2500, I don't want to look too far ahead, but 2500, that would be a healthy rating in the 15-minute category. I don't know, that would be pretty tough though, given that the next highest rated player in this category is currently like 2350. And you see how much trouble like these 2200s can give me. Like, these guys are not easy. I never have simple games against these players. So f6 makes sense. He's just blocking my bishop. e4 comes to mind, seeing if he'll take, so I can play like rook e1 with tempo then on the bishop. He could drop his bishop back to c6 then. I don't know if I have compensation there, but it's intriguing nonetheless. I could also move my knight right now. Like, say I play knight d2. This is a common maneuver. I'd be trying to come to c4. Also, queen h5 check is enabled. What about knight d2, bishop takes b5, a takes b5, rook takes a1, queen takes a1, queen takes b5. But then what is my knight doing on d2? That seems strange. Yeah, I don't know if I like that line. But I definitely want to look at knight jumps here. Like even wacky stuff like knight e5 or knight g5 I got to consider, because the queen coming into h5 check could be useful. So knight d2, bishop takes b5, a takes b5, rook takes a1. I could play queen h5 check then, but he just plays g6. That's no good. So I'd be looking at having to take on a1. Queen takes b5. Yeah, I just think that knight is misplaced there, though, at the end of that line. I'd really like to play e4 as well. I think e4 is like a move I could get behind. What about simply taking and then playing knight d2? Or taking and then playing e4? Anything wrong with that? Probably not. Here's an idea as well. e4, bishop takes e4, knight e5. That way, if f takes e5, I have queen h5 check. If he plays king d8, I can check on h4 and pick up the bishop, hitting the rook, also hitting the e5 pawn. So e4, bishop takes e4, knight e5, f e5, queen check. If g6, I have queen takes e5, hitting the bishop, hitting that rook in the corner. Wowzers. Okay, let's try that. It's a principled move once again. We just advance in the center, tempt him to capture. Well, the problem is I'm burning some time with these decisions. With the decision to play castles and now this move e4. But I think it's worth it to spend a little more time here because this will influence how the resulting position will be played. Yeah, he seems content just to kind of play defensively and not get involved in tactics too much right away. That makes sense. He's getting ready to castle now. Okay, now I can play knight d2. I could trade. Knight d2, he takes, I take. It's more of the same. I could play e5. If e5, he'll play f5 almost certainly. Okay, let's just go. I'm torn. I'm torn here. Knight d2, e5, or take on c6. e5, he just plays f5, and I get control over d6, but I'm weakening some other squares. All right, I'm going to take. I've given in. I've given in and captured. And if he takes with the knight, I'm going to play knight d2 and try to bring the knight into c4. Free that option up. I think the knight could be good there. Oh, he takes with the queen. This guy's playing some moves that surprise me. They're not bad moves, they just surprise me. E5, again, F5 will be played, but that's a little bit different this time. E5, F5, knight D2. Queen D5, maybe? If I play knight D2 immediately, I wonder if his idea is D5. Because then his pawn on D5 is better protected. Okay, let's do this. Yeah, and then we'll reroute this knight. I'm blocking my dark square bishop, though. That's the major drawback of this move. But on the diagonal with the pawns on f6 and g7 anyways, it was already running into a brick wall, so this is potentially okay. Okay, now let's bring this here. So c4 is the destination for that knight. I could definitely imagine him playing queen d5 right now to keep it out of c4 and also free up the c6 square for his own knight. And in that case, queen e2 is what I was looking at. Nope, he's just going to let us do this. Okay. Now if queen d5, I could trade on d5 and play knight b6, attacking the rook and attacking that pawn. That's winning something for me. Now what to do for him? Maybe develop the knight through a6? I would probably play queen d3 in that case. Just get ready to double up on the d file. Plays rook a7. I think still queen d3 is a good plan. Yeah, I see no reason to deviate. Oh, I dropped this pawn. Or did I? Yes, I think I did. Rook takes a4, knight a5, he has queen a4. Blech. Should have played b3 first. I've been doing so well in these games without blundering. And there you go. Oh, but he didn't see it. Okay. Lucky me. Yeah, I think rook takes a4 was just possible there. Okay, so now if I trade and he takes, I can't move my knight somewhere to attack anything, so he's going to be able to play d4 next move. So I think just this. I hate that feeling when right after you make the move, you see what you did wrong. And you're just waiting for the other guy to do something. whether he's going to see it or not. It's like the worst feeling in chess. Realizing that you just blundered. He can play knight c6 now. Complete his development. Maybe I'll go a5 then, though. Yeah, I probably should put this pawn on a5. Because then my other rook is freed up to go to d1. If knight c6 and I play like b3, trying to defend a4, then I'm worried about rook b8. Rook b8 is a move I don't like necessarily. Okay, so he plays rook c8. So if knight b6, rook c7, I suppose. So I'm thinking a5 again should be played by me. Let's do that. I'd say by now, unless he does something soon to free himself, we're going to be looking at a nice positional advantage. Because this d pawn is backward, our a pawn is passed and strong, supported by 3 pieces, probably only by 2 once I move this rook to the d file. So, yeah. Certainly black would have liked to play rook takes a4 if he had seen that. He develops the knight, okay. Well, if I play rook a d1, aren't you just going to have to go and defend this pawn again? I guess he's going to play rook c7 as his contention. Maybe I should play f4 first, just to support e5 a bit better. Is he threatening anything right now? I don't think so. Yeah, let's play f4. We'll just be solid. He can play g5. I'll just play g3 and support the pawn in this case. Well, maybe I could take. The d6 square is tender, but g3 would be my first instinct. Actually, I could take, because if bishop takes g5, rook g3 pins him. Pins the bishop to the king. So what to do for him now? His knight is his only active piece, or the piece with the most potential, I would say, coming to b4 or d4. But for the moment, he can't do anything with that piece. All right, king here makes sense. He's probably going to try to play king e8. Knight d6 is never working. Let's just bring this over. Can also come up through a3 maybe, like rook a3, rook b3. But I don't know if going to b5 or b6 is achieving anything. Okay, so he just defends. I think king f1 is probably a good idea. I could check. He'd have to take then. Pawn takes. Is that anything? Maybe rook g3 to try to open up some possibility with that. So knight d6 check, bishop takes, pawn takes, rook moves, let's say, to b7. Rook to g3. I don't see much there. Let's first play king f1. I kind of want to get off this long diagonal. That seems weird, but in the event that he ever plays knight d4 and I take and he takes with this pawn, I want to be able to play rook takes without worrying about bishop c5. So that's the point of this. Just get the king off a dark square. Gets a little closer for the endgame. Given that I'm under 5 minutes, I think it's a good practical move. Okay, so that move does allow this knight d6 reply. However, bishop takes, pawn takes, rook b7. If I take, my a5 pawn is loose. But I might be creating some mating nets against his king soon. Knight d, or rook h3 maybe? Or rook g3? Let's go rook h3. Attack that pawn. If h6, I'm thinking rook g3. But then he has g5. So maybe knight d6 check now. Bishop takes, pawn takes, rook b7, rook g3. Maybe that's the way to go. That looks good. Let's do that.
Check.
So we're kind of cashing in on our d6 influence at this point. But I want to go after that g-pawn. I think he's left his king side vulnerable, especially by moving his king away, and he's got all his pieces bunched up over here. So I'm no longer looking towards like my a-pawn to be a factor in the long run. I'm just trying to wipe out his king. And I think he's going to have trouble because, to rook g3 now, he has issues with that pawn. I could just take right away, but I kind of like rook g3 even better. If he wants to take a5, he has to waste a lot of time. I'm getting rook takes g7 in on the next move. He could try to play knight d4 and block me, but still rook takes g7. I won't even take him right away. This pawn on d6 is tremendous. Almost cuts the board right in two. It restricts his king. Okay, so he's doing something kind of radical now. Let's just take that. And we'll take back. In the event of a capture, we'll be threatening rook g8. If after, let's say, h takes g5, rook takes g5, king f7, rook g7 check, king f8, I can play rook h7 and try to come to h8. Wow, he's going to do that. I don't think that is going to work, though. It's g6. I doubt this is working. Maybe I put my bishop into f6 now, and then try to go, after bishop f6, maybe I have time for rook g5, rook takes h5, rook h8 mate. It's a nice idea. I can start with rook g5 too, but he's going to play knight d4 somewhere down the line. Bishop f6, king here. That slows me down a little bit, doesn't it? Okay, let's just play this first. The knight d4 move is mildly annoying. Kind of has to play it. Can I just play rook takes d4, though? Rook takes d4, pawn takes, bishop takes. I can almost do that. Rook takes d4, pawn takes, bishop takes. Rook takes a5, rook takes h5. He has e5 there. Oh, this is so close to just winning. b4 also looks really good in this position. b4 just undermined the support of the knight. g7 check. Does that ever... Okay, I'm going to get fancy. I'm going to play b4. He might have to play e5 against this move. Okay, now I get my bishop into f6. This is kind of what I wanted. Yeah, bring this in here. So now rook takes h5, rook h8 is just the threat. We've got this mating net going. Again, all his pieces are just scattered over here. Kind of marooned on the queen side, if you will. I think he had to take a little more time there. e5 was interesting if he had tried to block up the position. Now I think he's busted, because after king g8, rook takes h5, he doesn't have time for rook f8. I'm just mating him on the next move. Yeah, he's sacking something. He's pretty desperate now. Do I even have to take it? I will take it. Just to be safe. Our bishop is an absolute monster on f6. He has to resort to extreme measures to try to stave off mate, but I can just take here. Rook h8 coming. Yeah, could pre-move that move if we wanted to. So our coordination turned out to be the deciding factor, but like I said, he might have missed some more tenacious ways to defend at the end there. And I'm not happy that I missed rook takes a4 earlier, and he resigned. So we won 8 rating points for that game. It's good. Let's go back and have a look. So all of this is theory up till bishop c6. That might also be theory. I'm just not sure. I've had some games where black does not take on b5. They'll try to avoid doing that, just delay that decision for a while. For instance, g6 is fine. And they might find it more convenient to capture later. There's kind of like a waiting game that goes on. Like white might not want to commit this bishop quite yet. Usually white plays like knight f3 and then a4 and then moves like rook a3. Trying so that if a takes b5, he can recapture on b5 in one go. But my opponent played one of the main lines with queen a5, bishop d2. And I like the philosophy of just returning the pawn in this line. For having returned the pawn, we speed up our development, and we kind of ask black how he intends to play in a position where he needs to get his king to safety, and he's a tempo or two behind white in that regard. So I've seen some games that go e6, bishop c3, and now bishop e7. And this is what I was referring to, where if bishop takes g7, black plays rook g8, and then he can capture on g2 hereafter. So I was comparing that to the game continuation. I do wonder what the computer likes here. I spent some time. I did castle, okay. Yeah, I didn't want to speed up his development. I wanted to avoid this. It just seems like he's achieved a useful trade at no expense. So by castling, I was making a calculated decision that this position would be fine for me, and that I would have good compensation. I think I was looking at queen a8 mainly here. Maybe he's fine. E6, bishop c3, f6. Because it is hard to crank up the pressure on the knight. Like bishop e5 is not going to work. I could try to get the rook over, but even rook a5, I guess he's just pulling the queen back to b6. I see a move that I miss that the engine likes. If bishop takes b5, I can actually play queen b3. Whoops, I meant to draw the circle on that square. Queen b3. I didn't see that. Maybe I would have found it. Probably not. I probably would have just recaptured on b5 automatically, but that's a nice resource I'll have to keep in mind. The pin down the b file. And then knight c6, I can take on b5. And here I don't have to sacrifice a pawn. Actually, if he takes, he's probably just busted. Yeah. We trade the rooks and look at black's development just languishing, and my rook is about to make an appearance on a8. Yeah, black's in major trouble just losing there. But he played e6. Good move. I put the bishop on the long diagonal. So again, if bishop takes b5, queen b3 is possible with advantage to white. So he prefers f6. And I played e4. Here again, I had a little think. I wasn't quite sure what to do. The computer says take, and after knight takes, play knight h4, trying to go queen Pschaak. You know, I was looking at knight h4. For some reason, I never thought it was effective, but I don't know why, because that makes perfect sense. He can't go g6 because he loses the f6 pawn. And the point is now, like, let's say he just plays bishop e7
Check.
and I give a check. g6, I have knight takes g6, and he's pinned. If he takes on g6, I'm taking the rook on h8.
Check.
Sorry, I'm making so many mouse slips. But I played e4, and I kind of felt like if he took the pawn, that this move would be strong. Oh boy. Oh, that's what I miscalculated. Take, check. He can play bishop g6 to block. Aha. I saw that if king here, I have queen h4 check, forking the king and the bishop on e4. And I also saw that if g6, I have queen takes e5, forking the bishop and the rook. But I most certainly did not see bishop g6. I wonder if I would have fell for that. Hopefully not. I'd like to think I wouldn't. I'd like to think I would find that and check myself. But I can just play rook e1, and the computer thinks I have good compensation. He cannot support the bishop with pawn d5, because that's illegal. The pawn is pinned. Bishop c6, knight h4 again. Okay, so it seems like this knight h4 move was the key. I consistently underestimated or did not look at that move. But in a lot of these variations, knight h4 is the top engine suggestion. Okay. But overall, I think my game plan of refusing to play bishop takes c6 for as long as I could was correct. Just maybe my execution was off. Yeah, in retrospect, it would have been better to try for that knight h4 move. Or I guess if I do take, then go knight h4 immediately, with queen h5 being the follow-up. So I played e4. He just developed bishop e7. Here I did take. I no longer saw any benefit to avoiding this capture. And that surprised me. I thought he was going to take with his knight. I thought he was just going to play this, and that seems more coherent. But maybe he wanted to get d5 in faster. I probably would have played knight d2. I don't think I would have played knight h4. And he can't play d5 here, at least, because I trade, and then I do have queen h5 check, forking the king and the pawn. He took with a queen, forcing me to do something with my e-pawn. I opted to advance it. He played f5, makes sense. Yeah. Then I swung the knight back. I was thinking he might want to go here to try to stop knight c4, or at least hinder that. Maybe I can even just play b3 and stick the knight in on c4 next move. Or queen e2. Queen e2 is another way to do that. But he simply castled. I played knight c4 as planned. He went rook a7, overprotecting d7, also avoiding knight b6 stuff in the event of queen d5. And here I just blundered. Queen d3, allowing rook takes a4. Awful move. Yeah, I should probably play a5, huh? Just make that pawn advance at a time when it's well protected. And then follow up with moving the queen probably on the d-file and potentially doubling up on that d-file. So luckily for me, he did not take the pawn. But yeah, rook takes a4. So the computer thinks I have compensation. How is that? I was thinking about playing b3 and just trying to play this resulting position, because I do have some control, especially over that d6 square. But yeah, black must be better. He's solid and he's up a pawn. But if rook takes a4 had been played, for a second the computer was thinking I had almost full compensation. Knight a5, queen e4, because otherwise if the queen gets forced away to a different square, he loses the rook. Queen takes, rook takes, f3. This is rook running out of squares. Rook e2, rook fd1. Maybe king f1 is coming. He can't move the knight at least because of the attack on d7. So this is a line I might have been able to back into in the event of rook takes a4, but certainly I would not go into this willingly. Queen d3 was just a pure blunder. But he thought for about 30 seconds or so and then played queen d5. And now I think I'm back on track. We trade the queens, and I like my position a lot. Rook c8. I really felt like he should just play knight c6 earlier in some of these positions roundabout here. Yeah, the pawn belongs on a5. I'm pretty certain about that. He plays knight c6 now. I played f4. I think it's a useful move just to stake out some territory on the king side. Maybe preempt him playing g5. And also overprotect the e5 pawn. He went king f7. I just doubled up the rooks. He defended. So as soon as he defends this way, I was looking at the knight d6 idea at all times, because if I were to play knight d6, he would have to take it. And I'm taking with a pawn and opening my bishop and gaining a tempo on his rook. So even though here it's not quite good yet, that was the idea that caused me to look at things like rook g3 or rook h3 coming up. For the moment, I just played king f1. I think this is a good waiting move. I didn't see anything concrete on the queen side or in the center. And like I said, I might want to be able to, in the event of knight d4, take twice without having to worry about bishop to c5 skewering my rook to my king. So I like king f1. I think overall it's a good move. If I play g3 as the engine suggesting, I can no longer swing my rook over here. So I don't know if I like that as much. Yeah, I'm just reading the engine line down here, and it's suggesting some plan where I play like king g2 and then like h3 and try to gradually gain space, but I don't know about that. So king f1, he played king e8. I went here. So what's the difference between rook g3 and rook h3? If rook g3, I thought he would play g6 and thereby protect his g-pawn. I would like that pawn to be on g7 so that when I do play knight d6 is in the game, I could just be attacking it on g7. But I guess rook g3 deserves consideration as well. I played here, he played h6, then I came to g3. Oh no, then I checked, okay. Why didn't I go here? I think because of g5 I didn't like. Even here I can take or play the rook back, and he still has problems with this. G takes f4, rook takes h6. Yeah, the king side is getting opened at an opportune time for me and a vulnerable time for him, because again, his major pieces are stuck on the queen side. I might even lift the other rook over and try to create a mating net around black's king. But as played, I checked first. If he doesn't take, so if, say, king f8, I have knight b5, forking the two rooks. And that will be winning. So he's compelled to capture. I take with the pawn, opening the bishop. That's the whole point. Yeah, and given that when he plays rook c8, he has trouble on the back rank all the time, maybe he should play this. Rook c to b7. Maybe that was more tenacious. And then let's compare that. Like rook g3, he takes a5. I take here. Knight c6. It still looks pretty risky for him. Yeah, I'd much rather be white now. Rook h7, but At least now, like rook h8 or rook g8 is never an issue. He's not getting skewered. He can always run to f7. So that probably was a better option. Instead, he plays rook c8. I go rook g3, and now my advantage is growing rapidly. He played g5. I took. The computer thinks maybe knight takes a5 is a better chance, but regardless, I'm taking on g7 next move. Knight takes a5, rook takes g7, rook c6. Again, sidestepping this. But yeah, this looks awesome for me. Rook d3. Oh boy, computer's getting up there with the eval. One plan is like this, take and checkmate him. I don't know how that matches up with the need to protect the d6 pawn, but that's an idea. Oh, I can also, like, let's say he comes here, I can play this move too. And then rook g8 check, king f7, rook 3 to g7 is the mating net. Okay. Knight takes d6, check, king e7, check, knight f7, forced, rook h8 trying to come here. This also is winning for white. Because he can't protect the knight. If d5, intending here, king f8, I have this trick. And then check and go pick up the rook. Ouch. So he played g5, I took. And then h5 pushing past. I was pretty certain my position was winning now, as you see, +4, but he threw up a couple roadblocks. Rook g5. Yeah, rook h3 is also possible, but rook g5. So very simply, I want to try to just get the rook into h8. He played practically the only resource he has against that, knight d4. I guess he could have played e5 too, trying to block the bishop, but that, at the very least, gives up this with check. Rook d5 is also good, trying to go after the c5 pawn. So he did knight d4, and okay, so this is like a critical moment in the game. Probably the critical moment of the game, because I won in the next like 2 moves. Because he played this knight b5 follow-up. So I could take and then try to like bank some material, but then he escapes into a rook endgame, and like say something like this happens, you can always come here, and maybe I end up like with an extra pawn or two in this rook endgame, but given the time, I don't know how confident I am I can win that. Moreover, he's like kind of out of the woods. You know, he traded off my strong dark square bishop that was trying to weave a mating net around his king. So I was trying to look for ways where I could keep this dark square bishop and still make this idea happen. And b4 is a good undermining move, trying to knock out the only support of the knight. And I just think he moved too fast here. He had 5:35 and he played knight b5 in 10 seconds. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of time to think, but he has twice as much time as I do. And if he doesn't make the right move here, he's dead. So knight b5 was rushed. I was thinking he should play e5. And then hoping for some sort of mess like this where eventually I might just have to give in and take. Maybe this is winning, but it seemed less clear. How is this winning? Rook e1, and I'm going to try to come in here. If rook a8, I come here instead. And I guess then the plan is rook takes h5, rook h8. Okay, so maybe this turns out to be winning, but that would have challenged me much more than the game continuation. And actually maybe, I mean, b4, the computer suggests some weird-looking line. King g7 blocking the pawn, and I guess if I take, the idea is still to come here. Yeah, and I'm not quite decisive yet. I'm not seeing exactly how I'm going to win this. I am up 2 pawns with a pretty nice-looking position, but there's no immediate way to end the game. So he had to find something like that, because knight b5, bishop f6 is just terminal. His king is ensnared. Oh yeah, the only other thing I wanted to mention was after knight d4, I briefly looked at this line, sacking the exchange on d4, take, and then take. The idea being to attack the rook and try to gain time to pull off this whole idea. It's just that I saw like at various times he could always play e5, and I wasn't sure, again, like if I could win that resulting rook endgame. e5 blocking the bishop, so I continue with rook h8. King g7. Well, I guess I could take here first, check, get him to take, and then go take the rook. Yeah, I guess I'm going to be up 2 pawns. This is probably winning, although maybe he can eliminate. Yeah, he'll eliminate one of the pawns. I will still be up 2 pawns then, though. Well, actually, can I defend the d pawn? If he can take the d pawn first, then take the g pawn, then I'm only up 1 pawn. There's also the line, which is maybe even better for him. I think I saw this one. After bishop takes d4, if he goes rook c1 check first, king e2, then take, rook takes h5, and again this e5 move. That's even less clear. Bishop c3. Computer says +2, but this is a time scramble situation. I wasn't sure about this line. So hence I eventually opted for b4, but I'm getting down there on the clock. But this is over. He can't stop my main threat. Whereas if I had done that earlier, by the way, just to show this variation, after king f8, if I had played bishop f6 now, he can defend. He can play here. And if I go rook g5, I believe he can do this. So, okay, so another win for the e3 Benko line. I think I had a pretty decent position out of the opening. I definitely learned something in this game that if bishop takes b5 in these scenarios, often queen b3 is a good reply, pinning black down the b file. So I'll be adding that to my mental arsenal. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you picked up something useful. So thank you guys for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Bye, guys.